We also have other infrastructure projects, so NZTA, Auckland Transport, Kiwi Rail, water care are all building, which means that often we're in the way. So we need to move our assets out of the way for them, and we're looking at $350 million of that sort of work for us over the next 5 years. And so we're moving all those towers. Obviously, we don't want to hold up any infrastructure, but it doesn't really advance our business very much. We're kind of moving it for everybody else without actually doing things for the good of our grid, for good of our network. And if you look at those, Alison touched on a few of those challenges there about generation not being in Auckland. Obviously got some underbuild, but those have been resolved through the AUP process, which is fantastic. We also have a public expectation around undergrounding and undergrounding all our assets in Auckland, and a few other things around how we are regulated in our funding structure through that. We're having many ongoing conversations with all these infrastructure providers. That just gives you an idea of that $350 million for us. Obviously it's much bigger for all of those that we're dealing with, includes those property developers there for special housing areas. So we're having ongoing conversations with all these key stakeholders, with you as a council, as part of your council family, with Panuku and Auckland Transport, and also those communities of interest where our infrastructure touches those communities. So for example, if you just go back, David, for example, for the East-West Connections project, we are moving towers for that roading project. We're moving 7 of those, as well as some other sorts of strengthening to our assets as required. And the moment when we do that, when NZTA, if NZTA gets that, those consents and that project goes ahead, that'll cost us NZTA $40 million.
Is that the East-West link you're referring to? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the East-West link for those towers, plus any work that we need to do at Southdown Substation, moving some Kiwi Rail assets there that touches on Kiwi Rail for the road that goes through. And so the next slide is really just about our process. So we're doing work on our current documents now. We're taking all that information. We're in an optioneering phase at the moment. We're long listing, as Alison said. We're looking at 30 years in the future. That that clean sheet of paper. We're looking to be bold. Using the Team New Zealand analogy, we're throwing the ball out really far and looking to see what our network would look like in 30 years' time, taking into account what we know of technology now, that uncertainty into the future, what it would look like if everything was electrified. And we're going to come up with some options. So we're at the moment, we're long listing those, and we'll have an optioneering report in October. We're talking currently to key stakeholders, to all the council family. We'll be heading out to communities of interest after October, and then coming up with that vision, that strategy for Auckland in June next year. So that's it. If you have any questions.
Have any questions?
Thank you. Succinctly, thank you. Questions, members? I've got Councillor Clow, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Clow.
You talked about that you have towers due for replacement 2025. I think that's what was alluded to. And then there was a brief mention there of public expectation of undergrounding. So what regards visual pollution of the towers, what are the plans long term for replacement of the towers to go underground in the urban environment?
I can talk to that one. We have had an extensive dialogue on undergrounding. The challenge we have for an existing line to replace it with undergrounding is 7 to 10 times more expensive than building an overhead line. And where you have an option to, you can replace a conductor. If I could, David, just have a. This is for interesting piece of underground cable, and you can see it's quite extensive. You can get, and we need 3 of those, or you can get 3 of those in the air, because the air is just a much better conductor. The cost of doing equivalent is 7 to 10 times more expensive to go underground than to go aerial. So where we have to run new lines, so we need new power supply, for instance our North Auckland and Auckland, that's a cable that runs from Brown Hill into Pikaranga up into Penrose and through the tunnel to Hobson across the Harbour Bridge. You'd always go for undergrounding with cable where you haven't got a corridor because it's just too expensive to get the easements by the land and do things. Where we have existing lines up, it's just so much more cost effective to reconductor. You can keep them going forever. So we do look at undergrounding. For instance, we have undergrounded at Highbrook, where the developer has paid for the undergrounding. Also Southbrook and Hamilton, in Christchurch, and we're looking at Flatbush, the new special housing agreement. But the developer is paying for that. We're not funded under the Commerce Commission. So it's a question of what is the value, and if the council or people of Auckland wanted us to underground existing lines, the extra cost to do that would be the consideration for how we can do that. So things are technically possible, but the challenge is the economic cost for the visual improvement. And you do have to understand when you have undergrounding, you still have to have receiving stations. So a station that takes it from the air underground and again coming back up, and they're quite large footprints, pieces of land. And where you have the cables, those big cables have to be far apart too for heating. You can't immediately build on top, you have to be able to access. So there are some challenges, but principally it is if you had an extra $1 billion to spend on infrastructure in Auckland, my challenge to you is, would you spend it on upgrading your current roads, water, etc., or would you do it to improve the visual impact of power with no extra increase in your quality or supply?
So in your business plan, effectively, you're saying for the next 30 years you're not planning on undergrounding anything unless the council or the government came up with an extra, well, we need 7 or 8 billion now, so what's another billion?
No, what we're
Almost.
that would be a traditional approach, but as Rebecca said, what we are looking at is saying, what would we like to have, what to meet Auckland's needs, the growth where the city wants to be in 30 years' time, what kind of grid would you like to have to support that? And then we can say, well, if that's the ideal and where are we today, how much we work towards that, what are the challenges? We're not starting with a position to say you can't afford it, we can't do that. We'll come back and have conversations to say, if that's what you want, this is how we might do it and these are the challenges. Yep. And I'm just being open with you that funding will always be a challenge, but we're not sitting here saying, no, we can't do that.
Thank you. Now I've got a number of